Welcome everybody to this Wellbeing of Women webinar. I'm absolutely thrilled that you've joined us today. I think you're in for a real treat. We've got two superb speakers to celebrate the fact that this is Menopause Awareness Month, and this webinar is all about managing the menopause in the workplace. My name is Lesley Regan and I'm an obstetrician and gynecologist. I'm based at Imperial College on the St Mary's campus, and I'm also the chair of Wellbeing of Women, the charity that funds research into every aspect of women's health from cradle to grave. And interestingly, when I took over the charity just a year ago, we decided that we needed to become bolder and reach further. And so in addition to funding research projects, we've also embarked on a strategy that includes providing really good educational information for women about every aspect of their health throughout their life course, and also a very ambitious advocacy program. And as part of that wish to become a greater influence on the health and the well-being of girls and women, whether they be in the workplace or at home or wherever, we've also wanted to ensure that we would able to communicate. And during the confines of the pandemic or the COVID lockdown, we've been hosting many webinars on a whole variety of topics. But because this is Menopause Awareness Month 2021, we thought it was really important that we focus today not just on the menopause in general, but the menopause in the workplace. And so I'm very, very thrilled that our two guests today, Peppy Abernethy and Maria Semedalas, are going to help us with that. One as an expert practitioner, and one as a woman who's gone through and had some problems dealing with the menopause in the workplace. And I'm really grateful to them both for their honesty and their candor and coming to talk about these issues, because I know that everybody who's joined us on the platform today will really appreciate their words of wisdom and their experience. Now, I'm sure you're all very practiced now at joining these. You'll know that this webinar is being recorded and you will be able to access the information on it at a later date. Please use the chat function if you'd like to send us comments. The Wellbeing of Women team are behind the scenes or even behind the logo on this platform, and they will be monitoring the chat and prompting me if I miss something that's come through about one of the questions that you might want to pose to our panelists. You'll be able to see this and previous webinars that we've run for women's health on YouTube, and one of our team will be sharing all these links with you in the chat function as we go through this webinar. And as I say, it's going to be recorded and you'll be able to access that and the chat function at a later date if you wish to. So one of the things that I'm most proud of is that we last week launched our Menopause Workplace Pledge. And this is our new campaign to really promote awareness of the menopause, because when we talk to women who were badly affected by it, one of the things that they felt most strongly about was the fact that they felt that it was a taboo subject. They couldn't discuss it. Often they couldn't discuss it with their families, but also most particularly they couldn't discuss it openly in the workplace. And they all told us that if this could change, it would make a really very big difference to their welfare at work. And so what we're doing is we're asking companies to sign up to sign the pledge. And it's not an onerous pledge. It's about recognizing that there is a problem, recognizing that the women in their workforce are usually between the ages of 45 to 55 when they experience their menopause. So of course, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that they're having problems managing at work at a time in their careers where they're at their most experienced and at their most productive. So the main aim of this campaign is to encourage employers to find ways to retain their staff and capture all of that expertise and productivity and experience and keep it in the workplace so that we can all benefit from it. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you now to our speakers. And Peppy Abernethy is going to start off by talking to us about what the menopause is, roughly when it happens, what the symptoms are and how you're able to recognize them, what to do if you think you might be starting. She's got an awful lot to get through, but I know because she's a very accomplished speaker and presenter that she'll be able to do it. Thank you so much for coming, Peppy. Not just for your clinical expertise as a menopause specialist, but for all the work that you've done to promote menopausal health and well-being, Kathy's an independent prescriber with a master's degree in community gynecology and reproductive healthcare. And she's the immediate past chair of the British Menopause Society, which is the professional society for healthcare practitioners. So we couldn't really ask for anyone better qualified. She's also the author of a superb book, because she very kindly sent me a copy. It's entitled The One-Stop Guide to Menopause. And I strongly urge you to get a copy, because it makes very easy reading and really is really quite revelationary in what the things that you can do to help yourself. So I'm not going to take up any more time. Kathy, thank you again for coming, and this platform is all yours. And remember, please, audience, that if you have questions or queries, please put them in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lesley. Thank you for the introduction. As Lesley said, I am a clinician, so I'm still doing menopause practice. Until very recently, I was leading an NHS menopause service, and I'm now the Director of Menopause Services at Peppy, which is an organisation which brings menopause support into the workplace. And yes, next Monday, 18th of October, World Menopause Day. And those of you who follow the media will increasingly, over the next few days, see more and more around menopause and the conversation. And I've worked in the field of menopause for over 25 years, and I don't think I have ever seen so much chatter in the media about menopause. And that's really positive. We wouldn't be having a session like this, even just probably as recently as 5 or 6 years ago, we wouldn't have been having a session. So it's really exciting to see how times have changed and how things, I think, are moving in a very positive manner. So what actually is the menopause? Well, physiologically, it's simply the time when your periods stop. And if that's all it was, it would probably not be an issue for most of us at all. But the problem is, alongside the menopause comes what's come to be called the change, or the climacteric, to give it a scientific name, or more commonly now, we use the term perimenopause. And the perimenopause is the months, or sometimes years even, alongside your period stopping. And it's when those symptoms occur. So actually it's the perimenopause which causes the problem rather than the menopause itself. Because of course, the menopause itself is usually quite a positive experience. Your periods stop, and that's a positive side of the menopause, but those symptoms are not so positive. When does it happen? Well, commonly between 45 and 55. I have seen 60-year-olds still having periods, and 1 in 100 women will go into menopause under the age of 40, and 1 in 1,000 under 30. And some women will be put into their menopause very abruptly because they have surgery or they have cancer treatments, for example, which cause them to go into an induced menopause. But the average age is around 51, which, when you take into account that the perimenopause can start several years before that, some women will start to see their symptoms in their mid-40s or even earlier. And those symptoms can last for a long time for some people. Now, the media is getting much better about talking about menopause, but it hasn't always been positive. And it was Michelle Obama who said, look, half of us are going through this, and yet we live like it's not happening. We sort of pretend that we're not menopausal. And that's what a lot of the women's magazines tell us. A lot of them are very positive now, but in the past, there's been this subliminal message that actually we have to pretend we're not going through menopause. We have to not be going through aging. You know, it's not a natural thing. We do need to hide it. And that, thankfully, is changing. And there've been some very prominent people. Davina McCall, you can't possibly have missed the coverage of her on Channel 4, definitely brought it into everyday conversation. And Louise Minchin too, who said, it shouldn't be a difficult topic, but it is. I felt like I was walking over the edge of a cliff. And she says that one of her main symptoms was flushes. And she had to ask for the temperature in the studio to be turned down, which you feel might not be very difficult to do, but actually it was a very predominantly male organisation where she was, and she felt embarrassed to have to say, look, I've been at this temperature for years, but now we need to change it. And it was Gabby Logan who said, it's not a women's issue. We really must involve men in this discussion, because if you live with a woman, you work with a woman, you're in society with women, then you're going to be involved in the menopause. It's going to impact you. And at work, the Vodafone survey, which was a worldwide survey, not just UK, suggested that 1/3 of people hide their symptoms at work. And that's such a shame, because most managers, if we've got managers here today, most of you would say, actually, I want to help my staff. I want to improve the working balance for my colleagues. But if they hide it and don't tell you, that's a very difficult thing to do. That was a worldwide study, and I would hope that perhaps in the UK, we've got a bit better about talking about it. It was back in 2015 who Sally Davis, who's pictured here, was at the time the chief medical officer. So she was Chris Whitty of the time. And she said, look, we've got to be talking about this. We've got to talk about it as openly as we do any other health topic, because it's so important in the workplace. But this is what people say to me. This is what those going through the menopause say. Oh, I just need to be able to do my job. It's not about turning back the clock. I'm just not me. I want to feel normal again. And working women say, I'm hanging on in there. I can still do my job, but it's at what cost? Because I'm absolutely exhausted. I'm going home at the end of the day, or I'm turning my computer off at the end of the day, and I'm shattered. And I spend all weekend just recovering, ready to go back to work again. And please, I just want a good night's sleep. How many times have I been told that? Sleep has such a dynamic effect on the rest of our well-being. If you're not someone who's going to go into menopause, just have a think about what it's like when you have disturbed sleep. You know, you're irritable the next day, you're tired, you can't concentrate, and it's difficult to just continue with your work. And these are the kinds of stories that I'm hearing all the time, both in my clinic and also through the app where we support people. And I'm not going to go through all these symptoms, but just have a look at them. And if you're someone who's here to help support people, thank you for coming. And these are the types of symptoms that people will be experiencing. Yes, the typical flushes and sweats and headaches and tiredness that you probably recognise, but also things that you may not put down to menopause: joint pains, palpitations, bladder symptoms, things on the right, things like losing concentration, brain fog, word blindness, mood changes. You know, these things are real problems for people at work. And in fact, interestingly, the surveys show us that it's the ones on the right which cause more issues at work. Those are the ones which are more bothersome. And they're often the symptoms which start early in the perimenopause. So you may not even realise that you're going into it yet, and you start to have these symptoms and you start wondering, what is going on? You know, what is happening with my health? You may not have even seen any change in periods yet before you start to get these symptoms. Now, the good news is that hardly anybody gets all these symptoms, thankfully. You will tend to have a few of them, clusters of them, and you'll go in and out of them. So you may get waves of symptoms over a few months, and then it improves a bit later on. And there are some women, and we really don't know why. There's been a lot of research looking into this. Why do some women not get symptoms? You know, we don't know, but there are some women, probably around a quarter, who actually sail through their menopause without any problems at all. So menopause is not like pregnancy, where there's a clear pathway that everybody is going to go down a certain step approach. Menopause is different. There will be some women who don't need to talk about it, some women who don't want to talk about it, and some who do definitely need and want to talk about it. And of course, we have to acknowledge that no one lives through their menopause in isolation. It's never just hormones. All of these other factors are coming into play. So the stressors in our life, which might be family, could be work, could be other external factors, that will influence the way we experience our menopause symptoms, either to help make them easier if we manage our stress well, or sometimes to make the symptoms worse because we have the added stress at work or home as well. And similarly, the way that we live our life, the diet, the lifestyle we have, how much alcohol we drink, whether we exercise, that will also have an impact on our experience of health around the time of the menopause. So sometimes making small changes to those things can really improve the situation. How much support you've got at home and at work is also important. There's nothing worse than that spiral of despair where you don't know where to go, you don't know who to talk to, and you feel that you can't cope. And the culture that we have, that we've been brought up with, our own beliefs and attitudes towards both aging and towards the menopause, will also have a really strong influence. So I'm going to hand back to Lesley so that we can introduce Maria. You're on mute, Lesley. I think you're still on mute, Lesley. That's it. Lesley, sorry, we still can't hear you.
Sorry, I lost my screen and then the mute button disappeared. I really do mean that. So Kathy, thank you so much. And I know that our audience will now agree with me. We couldn't have had a better person or a better expert to introduce this. And thank you so much for coming and sharing with us your expertise. It's so important as well, the factors that you flagged up. And I think as well, as you mentioned, Sally Davis, who was our first ever female chief medical officer, she did so much to put women's issues on that front page. And we really do need more pioneers like that who can stand up and get women's issues to be counted. So I'm going to now turn to Maria Semedalas, and it's a real pleasure to welcome Maria here because she's a really top-notch international banking executive and board member. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about the impact of experiencing menopausal symptoms at work and highlight the importance of supportive working environments. And I hope that her account is going to give the employers on the line and also the employees on the line some ideas about how it's not that difficult to really change women's lives at work if you just put them in the centre and ask them what they need and then try and wrap your services around them. So this is not complicated, and that's why I'm so pleased that we're tackling it this way round. Somebody who's an expert in looking after menopausal women and a woman who's prepared to come and talk to us to camera about what it was like. So Maria, over to you, and thank you so very much for coming. I know you've got an enormous amount of expertise to add, but we're so grateful to you for your honesty and your candor to join us on this really important webinar. Thank you. The platform's yours.
Thank you, Lesley. And thanks to everyone at Wellness of Women for inviting me to share my story today. So before I begin, I'd just like to say that this story has a happy ending. By way of background, I've been a banking professional for more than 35 years. I've worked in some of the finest institutions on the street. And as you can imagine, it was intense and high pressure most of the time. As a busy professional in senior roles, menopause snuck up on me. That's all I can say. It snuck up on me. I became a mother at 41 and a half. So I still had a very young child when the perimenopause started for me. In short, as I like to say, older mothers, shorter journey to menopause. It's not something that was discussed, so I was unprepared. Even going through it, I didn't understand it. I didn't have hot flashes, so I thought this must not be it. My gynecologist had told me quite in passing one day that because of the history of breast cancer in my family, that I wouldn't be able to use HRT to get me through the menopause. Well, of course, we know today that's not exactly true. But he didn't also tell me what I should do. We should pause here. Lesson learned from me. Please speak to your doctor in advance and have a purposeful conversation. So professionally, I went through the menopause in a large American bank, working under very demanding circumstances. My boss wasn't very approachable, although he did have a very grand personality. Consider then, in an environment where even one meeting where your evil twin shows up, it can cause a significant damage to your career. As someone who's worked diligently in support of women in the workplace, I wonder how many women have made a premature exit directly or indirectly because of the menopause. As my symptoms progressed and high performance working became a problem for me, I ended up seeking professional help. We addressed my professional problem quite in isolation and without any regard to the effects of menopause. Even though my coach and therapist was a woman, it wasn't raised at all. Without a doubt, it was the hardest time of my life because I was feeling things I'd never felt before. My body was changing, and not in a good way. I was starting to feel that I was somehow over the hill and that my career was not salvageable. But let's pause for a minute, because in reality, it's the beginning of a wonderful new phase of life with some additional freedoms. And if you plan for it and look after yourself, it's actually quite a nice time. And this brings me to my point in this discussion for today. What we need to do to change other people's experience, and even hopefully to salvage a career or two. So first and foremost, we need to get this topic out of the closet in business. In the past, and let's call it the pre-politically correct time, there were references to periods in menopause, but they were highly insulting and even derogatory. There needs to be a discussion in industry about how women should be supported through this time of life. Corporate medical schemes should prepare women better and offer support during the process. Executive coaches should focus on women's health with their clients. It's something that just won't come up in the normal course of conversation for most women. There also needs to be an understanding, knowledge, and training for others. So read this one, men, and importantly, younger women who may not be aware of what it's like. Specifically to other women, I would like to suggest that kindness with each other can go a very, very long way during this time. So that was my story. And again, thank you for this opportunity. And I look forward to kind of keeping the conversation going. So Lesley, back to you.
Maria, thank you. That was just perfect. And I really, really empathize with so many of the things that you said, the family history of breast cancer, and all of those things, and also the importance of being kind to each other. So for anyone on the platform, if they've had experience of this or they're experiencing it, remember that if you talk about your experiences, either current or past, with another woman, I'm sure you will help her and you will encourage her to talk about it more widely. So that's really, really helpful. Thank you, Maria. I'm very, very grateful to you. Now I'm going to come back to Kathy Abernethy, and she's going to now talk about the management of symptoms and the treatments that are available, how you should aim to structure the conversation, just as Maria said, a purposeful conversation, the questions that you could possibly think about asking. So this is not an instruction list, this is a discussion. I'm providing you with the information that I think you're going to find useful when you go to seek help and to recognize your own symptoms. And she's then going to also touch on all of the organizational interventions and solutions that are available, and highlight to us, or if you like, signpost us to ways that we can go about helping ourselves. So Kathy, back to you. And thank you again for all of your help. And then when Kathy has finished her second presentation, we're working her very hard today. We're then going to have questions and answers that I will chair. So please put your questions in the chat, and please don't feel embarrassed. This is what this platform is all about. You can ask any question you like, and we will do our very best to answer them. So Kathy, over to you. Thank you again.
Thank you. And thank you, Maria, so much for sharing your story, because it's when you hear stories like that and you realise that this is actually what's happening in real life, that it really hits home that the work that we're doing is so important. And so much of what you said, actually, I mean, I completely understand your menopause story is unique to you, but so many of the threads that you mentioned are exactly the same that everybody else is experiencing. So thank you, Maria. When you approach the menopause, you know, where on earth do you go? It's really difficult to find evidence-based, relevant and personal information. You know, you can turn to Google, and if you put menopause into Google, you will get millions of search terms and millions of pages of documentation. How do you know what's good? You can also find the good ones. You can go to places like Menopause Matters, www Menopause Matters. You can go to Women's Health Concern, and I know that these are going to be put into the resource for you. Daisy Network, if you're under 40, is a really good website for younger people going through menopause. You can go to those websites which you can rely on for good information, but they still won't help you at an individual level necessarily, because you can learn the facts, which is important. You can educate yourself around menopause, and you can learn the statistics about risk of this and risk of the other. But actually what most of us want is, what can I do? What can I do to improve my personal situation for the symptoms that I'm experiencing? And particularly in relation to your own personal health. Maria mentioned her family history of breast cancer. You know, that's a discussion that needs to be had on a one-on-one level with someone who knows the facts and data. So sometimes medical treatment is necessary. And you might be surprised with all the hoo-ha there is about HRT at the moment. In the Daily Mail, the women's magazines and everywhere, everyone's talking about HRT. But actually fewer than 10% of women in the UK take HRT for their menopause symptoms. And yet it's the most effective treatment. And there are alternatives, which I'll come on to at the moment, but don't be scared of exploring and finding out about hormone replacement therapy, because it's a low risk option for most people, and it really is very effective. Alongside that, with or without HRT, you can do these other interventions. So you can look at your lifestyle, you could weight management, for example, all of the things that are around improving your health at the time of the menopause. We're concentrating very much today on thinking about the symptoms of menopause, but the menopause and the transition around perimenopause is about way more than just gritting your teeth and getting through it. It's about reevaluating your health and preparing for the future so that your life and your health later in life can be maximized. We want to all live long, healthy lives. And changes that we as women can make around the time of the menopause can have a real impact there. Hormone replacement therapy is not always offered, but you can look at things like if you go to Boots or Holland & Barrett or any of the other health food shops, you'll find a whole array of health food products. And if you look at the Patient Guide to the NICE guidelines, which is a really good summary of the evidence for different products, there are certainly some which will help particular symptoms. So black cohosh, for example, will help flushes and sweats. Red clover or plant estrogens can also help menopause symptoms. And there are particular doses that can be recommended to make sure that they work. And NICE is keen to point out to us as well that make sure you go for standardized, well-produced, high-quality products to be sure that you can be confident on the safety of those products. And I guess the other thing I'd say about supplements is that if you can't have HRT, if you genuinely cannot use HRT, then sometimes you can't use those supplements either for the same reason. So always talk to your prescriber or to your pharmacist. And then again, with or without HRT, you can start looking at strategy approaches, therapeutic approaches, I like to call them. Things like adaptation to your life. The most basic we all do almost intuitively, which is trying to avoid the things that make them worse. So hot flushes, can be triggered by alcohol, caffeine, smoking, feeling stressed, feeling anxious, feeling tight for time. You're more likely to get those flushes and sweats. And in the workplace, sometimes if you just take a step back in your mind and just take a little bit longer, for example, to get to meetings, arrive at meetings early. By the way, that's one of my good tips. Get there first. You can set the room conditioning and you can choose where to sit as well. Maybe that's by the window. So that's called adapting to your symptoms. But then there are therapy approaches as well. Acupuncture has shown some evidence for flushes and sweats. And then quality of life therapies, things like massage, reflexology. They may not change the number of flushes and sweats that you have, but they can really help you to have a degree of mindfulness, relaxation, and an improved quality of life at this time. And cognitive behavioral therapy has been a proven therapy for menopause symptoms, including flushes, sweats, low mood, and anxiety. So those are therapy approaches that it's worth. So I would say that there is no one treatment that is suitable for everybody. There really are a whole wealth of options. And it may be that you have to mix and match those options to get the best one for you. And of course, for that, you need that personal advice and consultation. So maybe you're at work, you're here to support people through the menopause. Maybe you're never going to go through menopause. What can you do to support those around you? Well, actually, you do not need to be a menopause expert, and you can take a big sigh of relief there because you don't have to know masses about the menopause. But what you can do is understand the basics of menopause, the impact that it can have on people at work. Know the type of symptoms that can be experienced, and the fact that even that symptoms can have an impact is a first step. Secondly, it's thinking about where you work. What is the culture around menopause? Is it a constant joke? Is it something that's embarrassing to talk about? Is it something that people would rather keep hidden? All of which probably needs to change. So we need to encourage a place of work where we can talk about it openly, with understanding, and be respectful. I know, and I do it myself, that we all make jokes about the menopause. I think I've probably heard every single joke in the world about menopause in my time, and they are funny sometimes. But when you're the one that's constantly the butt of jokes, it stops being funny. And if somebody comes to you as a manager with a problem at work, first of all, well done to them for feeling that they can talk to you, but also ask for the solution, because very often people do know what needs to be done to help them, but they need your support as a manager to actually implement it. So they may know that they need a fan on the desk, as simple as that, or they may need flexible working, coming in later within the constraints of the business. It may be that they need a uniform change, for example. So they may well know the solution, but can't actually put it into place. And that's where you're really helpful as a manager. So that means knowing the pathway of support in your organization. Do you have a pathway of support in your organization? That's what the Workplace Pledge is all about, to say that, yes, we do, and this is it. Know how to access the information and support in a very clear, easy way for people to do that. And I'm sure none of you would say anything like this, but these are some of the things I've heard before, which are not helpful. Aren't you too young for menopause? You know, you might think you're being flattering, but actually nobody is too young for menopause. And the stereotypical age of 50 may well not be the person who's having the menopause. Oh, it's not a big deal, it's perfectly natural. Well, yes, the menopause is a natural event, but for some it can be very troublesome. So we mustn't undermine that, and we must believe what they're saying. If you know someone who's had an easy menopause, you might wonder what all the fuss is about. Or even worse, maybe you've had an easy menopause and you certainly don't know what all the fuss is about. Actually, you need to look a bit more laterally and understand that everyone is different, and for some it can be really difficult. And the temptation, especially if you're an HRT user, oh, just take HRT, it solves all your problems. And actually, it's not as simple as that, because the decision to take HRT is a personal one, it's a medical one, and it's also one around our beliefs and our attitudes towards health. So it can be quite a difficult decision to make to start HRT. And then this one, how can you be menopausal? Questioning somebody, how can you be menopausal? Maybe they're younger than you expect them to be. Maybe they're a lot older because they're still experiencing long-term menopause effects. Maybe they don't actually look like a woman at all outwardly. How can you be menopausal? We need to avoid those assumptions. So what do I think people need to know? I think we need to help everyone to understand that it can be long and that symptoms can change and that people will go in and out of symptoms. And there may well be effect at work. It may be that they need to change the time of day of presentations, for example. I had one lady who said to me, I make sure that all my presentations are done at the beginning of the day when I'm at my best. And then at the end of the day, I'll do other tasks that don't require so much confidence and memory, for example. So everyone's different. Some people won't want to talk about it. And if you're a line manager, you may be very pleased for people to talk to you about it. But some people don't want to talk to a manager of the opposite gender or someone who's younger than them or someone whom they just don't relate to. So it's quite useful having people in the organisation that can step in, a bit like we have mental health first aiders, often called menopause champions these days, or alternative line managers. And you're not expected to fix it. That should give you a sense of relief. You know, as a manager, you're not expected to fix that person's menopause, but simply to support them through it. So what I'd say if you're experiencing a menopause or you're in an organisation is that I like to illustrate it with this pyramid, which was that if we get it right at the bottom and everybody in an organisation just understands the basics, then those who do need some support or minor adjustments, it's a non-issue because it's so easy, the pathway is very clear and it's very simple to put into place. That means that the few more who might need more major adjustments have an access through a clear pathway to occupational health or HR, for example. And I would like to hope that we would never get to the point where we have a performance review based solely on the menopause, because it has been dealt with so much further down the pyramid. And what we're doing today is we're laying the foundations, if you like, for this base level of the pyramid. So as an organisation, maybe you've signed up to the Wellbeing of Women Menopause Pledge to say that, yes, we're an employer who cares about our staff and wants to really bring menopause support into place. You may also be interested in the Menopause Friendly accreditation, which is a badge of accreditation which you can apply for as an organisation. And you have to meet certain criteria. There's an independent panel who judges and assesses the application that you put in. And what we're looking for there is not only do you have support in place, but also is there a clear pathway to that support? So in other words, if I said to your employer that you're a menopause employee, you're a menopause friendly staff, would they say, oh yeah, we are? Would they agree? Also a culture of complete inclusivity around menopause friendliness. And also, is it sustainable? Have you put a plan in place so that it's not just one person's project, but actually this is going to be sustainable into the future? And that's what being a menopause friendly organisation is all about. To help you along that way, there are organisations. I work with Peppy, so that's the one that I can tell you about, but there are other organisations as well who will come in with you and support you along that journey as you bring menopause support. At Peppy, we're quite unique in my opinion because we offer support with real practitioners. So it's people like me offering one-to-one menopause support delivered through the app, but with real practitioners at the end of the line. Oops, sorry, whizzed along a bit too quick. So thank you, Lesley. I'm happy to join you with some questions and come back to you.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Kathy. Another super presentation, really, really helpful. We've got lots of questions coming through in the chat. And I'm very interested, there was a comment from Patrick Shervington saying, yes, I'm a male and wanting to know how we work in the health service with in the operating theatres, and I think asking me a personal question. Well, I found it quite difficult, Patrick, when I was 49 or 50 and having perimenopausal symptoms. But I suppose one thing about the operating theatre is that you're usually wearing scrubs, so you don't usually get too hot. And you can often find places to go in the operating theatre where it gets cooler. But it's a good point. Some of our most experienced theatre staff, well, most of our theatre staff are women. And of course, the ones that are most experienced are the older women who are perimenopausal. So I've been very instrumental in my hospital and in the theatres there to talking about how we've got to make life really comfortable for them. But I don't have an answer for everything. But I think once again, it's the talking about it. And when I put it to the theatre staff, there were theatre managers that, this is what we needed to do to retain our workforce. They all said to me, oh, well, of course, yes, because they don't want to lose their really experienced staff to a problem that can be so easily reviewed. Now, I hope now that Maria and Kathy have sort of caught their breath back. So I'm going to start to ask them a few questions. One of them comes from Shirley Judd. Can HRT be taken indefinitely? After a hysterectomy, I've taken HRT for the last 10 years, but I'm being asked by my GP to stop and wean myself off. But they haven't given me a valid reason. Well, I would say, Shirley, you need to go back to your GP and ask for a valid reason. But I won't hog this. I'm going to pass it now to Kathy and then possibly to Maria to make a comment. Thanks, Kathy.
Yes, absolutely. I'd support what you say, Lesley. Go back and ask what's the reason that they think you should stop it, because they may have this inherent belief, which is actually not based on any evidence at all. Most women can stay on HRT for life if they want to. Not everybody needs to, not everybody wants to, and it's not right for all to stay on forever. But just go back and ask, what actually is it about HRT that you think I need to avoid?
And I think I'd also add in, because I think there are quite a few questions on this particular theme, that many GPs have been very frightened by publications that have come out from NHS England and Improvement and from the Medical Regulatory Health Authority, the MHRA, warning them about the risks. And I would say, and I'm happy to put it into the chat, Gojda or Laura can put it in, a link to the editorial that I wrote for the British Medical Journal a couple of years ago, where we were saying, look, we need to give information to women about what the risks are, but we mustn't frighten them by saying that it's a terrible risk of breast cancer. It does increase the number of cases of breast cancer, but it doesn't increase death. And that's a really important point because, of course, HRT can help you with all sorts of other problems that can be fatal, like heart disease, stroke, and thin bones. So it's important that the woman actually has all the information she needs to make the best decision for herself. So go back to your GP. And I suppose the other practical thing I would say is if your GP is refusing completely no, then I think you need to go and indulge in yourself and go to a menopause expert and get some help with that. But hopefully they will be able to help you. Now, are there any questions that you'd like to address, Maria, with your first-hand experience of this? Is there anything that you'd like to say? For example, one of the questions is, what if my GP refuses to give me an HRT prescription? What would you do in that situation, Maria, with your knowledge of going through this?
In hindsight, I would find another GP, frankly. Look, it's important to speak to a number of people, speak to family, speak to friends, speak to colleagues who have been through it already. Just that dialogue, if you glean just one or two tidbits from everyone that you speak to, it'll give you a much better picture of what you're up against and what your options might be.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Now, Kathy, there's a question here. As you start going through the menopause, it's common to have a few months of symptoms and then they may go away, then come back. Or well, basically what Sonia is asking is, do they have to be consistent for the diagnosis? How do I really know I've got it? And I think I know what you're going to say, but I don't want to take the words out of your mouth. Over to you, Kathy.
I mean, it would be great, wouldn't it, if you could just have a simple test to find where you were in menopause. And I know that most of us, would love to just have a saliva test or a blood test and be told. But actually, we have to listen to our bodies. And if you're going in and out of menopause symptoms and you're about the right age, then it probably is perimenopause. So no need for a blood test, especially if you're over 45. As for whether you start treatment, that's entirely your choice. Some people opt for HRT as soon as they get symptoms because they want to preempt them getting any worse, and they make that choice at that stage. Other women will wait until their symptoms are having a little bit more of an impact and they'll go down the treatment route a bit later. And lots of people start with lifestyle strategies, go on to over-the-counters, and then finally go on to HRT. It really is about knowing your options and making the choice that's right for you.
Great. And there's a question here from Louise, or I think a comment from Louise Nicholas to everybody about being in areas where possibly the GPs are not very well versed in HRT. I mean, it's always very difficult, and I certainly don't want to be a GP basher, because I don't feel that way about GPs.
No.
I think they do a fantastic job, particularly at the moment. They are completely inundated. But I would say, and this comes as a sort of a personal patient perspective as well as a clinician, it's really important you don't get cross, I think, with the GP, but that you actually possibly encourage them to understand more about it, possibly take along some information for them to look at and say, you know, I've read this, could you help me with this? Because I think this is really interesting. And I think what a lot of GPs may not fully understand is that the transdermal, so the gels and the skin patches that are so widely available now, really don't increase the risks of blood clots or thrombosis at all. So they are one of the safest ways to deliver HRT. And as I say, rather than get annoyed about them all, I would go armed with information and say, can you help me understand what this is? Because I think this might be something for me. Kathy, any other tricks to persuade your GP to think about helping you in a proactive way?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the way you approach your GP at an appointment will dictate the outcome. So make sure you're absolutely clear in your mind. Are you going for information, or are you wanting a diagnosis, or are you wanting treatment? And your opening sentence should be, I'm here because I want X, Y, Z, whichever it is. So be very clear of what you're hoping for the outcome. Do your homework beforehand. So do your research before, look at the websites that we've been talking about so that you know a little bit more and you're informed about it. And have your questions there. Don't expect to get half an hour at a GP in the UK. You're not going to get that. So just be prepared for the consultation, know what you're hoping to achieve, and be very clear that you've done your research beforehand.
Thank you. That's really, really valuable. So you've got the message there. Information is the absolute power game here. And you could actually help an awful lot of other women if you took some information along to your GP. I'm sure that you will be persuasive if you go along with that very facilitatory attitude. So there's lots of comments here as well, and there's one about transgender, and I thought I would address that, if I may. And it's a question of, don't really understand how transgender people are impacted by the menopause and whether their symptoms are those that you've mentioned or whether there are other things we should be considering as an organisation. So I think this is an insightful employer talking. But I would just possibly say here, and Kathy, you can correct me if you think that I'm inaccurate, but the menopause is really a deficiency syndrome. It's when your ovaries are no longer producing estrogen, and then your body systems, your organs and your tissues are responding to that primarily, all of your organs. So if you're a person, however you declare yourself gender-wise, if you do have ovaries, then you're likely to become or have menopausal symptoms between the ages of 45 and 55. So I think that you can have those symptoms, but of course there'll be lots of different individual variations. Kathy, I think that's a really important point, and this is a woman who's asking, I think, because she's possibly trying to care for an employer. So a really insightful question. Your thoughts? No,
absolutely agree. You know, we just the outward identification doesn't reflect the physiological changes. So we just need to be aware that if somebody's had ovaries and they've not been changed through any surgical interventions, then they will go through a menopause experience.
Yeah. And, you know, I know that I've met GPs who've been very anti-HRT and saying, yes, but, you know, this is a deficiency disorder. This is a problem because your ovaries are no longer producing the hormone that they used to and your body was used to. And I often say as well, you know, if I came in and my thyroid was underactive, you wouldn't have any problems with giving me thyroxine, which is a replacement therapy. It's not a drug, it's a replacement therapy. But as you can see, I'm very pro HRT. Well, I'm very pro women doing what they can, you know, what they want to do for themselves when they've got good information about it. So lots of questions here from HR directors in very macho companies. I wonder whether I could ask Maria if you'd like to comment. Lorraine Thomas is saying, you know, she wants to talk about her symptoms, improve things for other women. So Lorraine, yes, that's why I want our panelists to address your questions, because thank you for being kind to the other women. And she's saying she's so frightened that if she mentions anything, it will signal the end of her career. How do I broach the subject? Maria, can I ask you to take that one?
Yeah, of course. Look, that's a concern for most professional women that are in organizations where it is still a taboo. what I would suggest is a quiet conversation with someone in HR. Start the
Okay, I think Maria has just got a bit of a connection problem there. Kathy, can I just ask you to dive in there and save us?
Yes, certainly. And I think it's really important to be inclusive in the training that we offer in organisations. So yes, it's very tempting to do safe space meetings where we encourage women to come and talk about their menopause, and there is a place for those. But actually, I think it needs to be included in every training that we deliver. So which includes whatever genders are coming. That includes your health and safety training, your diversity training, your manual handling training, even menopause can be mentioned. So if we just make it in everyday conversation in everything that we do for men and women in an organisation, it becomes easier to talk about.
Lovely, thank you very much. And a couple of people are commenting that acupuncture has been helpful to them. I mean, Kathy, what would you say about acupuncture? I mean, I've always found that the acupuncture doesn't seem to have any downsides, but and a lot of people are, you know, do seem to benefit from it. So I've actually been broadly supportive. Would you agree?
Yes, and I think the group who perhaps have the most to gain are those who can't use hormone replacement therapy. And I know there's been a lot of work around acupuncture in breast cancer patients, for example. So you're not comparing, you know, the top gold standard treatment because they can't have that. So acupuncture does sometimes help. I think if you're going to a therapist, it's worth remembering that you're going to be paying for this service. So just get an idea that they are a registered acupuncturist with the body, you know, that registers acupuncturists, and just get a feel up front how many sessions you're going to need to pay for.
Yes, and I would also add, and I'll ask you to comment, Kathy, as well. Like I meet quite a lot of women who say, oh, they've been to have Chinese medicines, and I say, well, which medicines are they? And they say, oh, they're herbs, they're natural. And I said, yes, but which are they? You know, there's lots of herbs that can be very dangerous. So how do you manage that one as well? Because I'm not sort of throwing stones at the Chinese medicine brigade, but I do worry that they're using things which can have quite dramatic effects on the body, and often women just say, oh, it's natural, so it's fine.
Yes, absolutely. That's a big myth, isn't it? That if it's natural, it must be safer. And some of those things that you can buy over the counter, and particularly if it's being sort of tailor-made for you, may actually be contraindicated if you can't use estrogen. So you do have to be very cautious of what's in those products. I would go to the reputable sites. So you're going to buy it from a UK website or a European website, not some, you know, from the other side of the world where you can't check the quality and standardization. If you're bringing something that's herbal and selling it in the UK, then it has to meet the MHRA, that's the medicines standard. So it will have a little what's called a THR symbol on it. So you'll know that it does meet the standardization. It doesn't necessarily mean it works. It doesn't have to prove that, but at least you do know that it's safe.
Great, thank you for that. That's really, really helpful. And I see that the wonderful wellbeing team have put on that editorial into the chat so you can read it, so you can go armed with all the figures about how this even with breast cancer, it's not necessarily a no to HRT. Kathy, any other particular problems, medical problems, where women will be told, no, you can't have HRT, that's really contraindicated? I mean, I think it's always good to say there's never 100% yes or no, but what are the things that are going to raise red flags in your GP or even your gynecologist's mind?
And there is a difference between what a GP will prescribe and what a specialist might prescribe. So in fact, some of the more complex medical conditions, it would be quite reasonable for your GP to say, actually, I'm not very happy with this, but I will send you to somebody who is. So that might include if you've got lots of medical conditions, if you've had cancer in the past, for example, then you might want to see a specialist. I guess the ones that are a little bit more woolly, that you can take HRT and sometimes women are told they can't, is migraines. For a start, you can absolutely take HRT with migraines as long as you have the right type of HRT. Varicose veins won't stop you taking HRT. High blood pressure, epilepsy, those things won't stop you having HRT. You just need it tailored to the right type. And you know, a well-informed GP, and there are lots of really good GPs doing menopause now, will be able to tailor that for you.
Lovely, thank you very much for that. And then there's another question here from Lorna Nicholas, and she's saying she's a manager and she's trying to set and train support services for staff and is not getting a lot of buy-in from her seniors. And you're making a comment, Lorna, about trying to get staff lighter material uniforms. Well, I can't give you the magic words that you need for your seniors, But what I think we will do is ask the Wellbeing of Women team to put you in touch with the people at Tesco's who've done an enormous amount of work on actually changing the material that their uniforms for many of their staff on the shop floor and in their warehouses work through. So they're one of the many, many companies that signed up to our Menopause Workplace Pledge. And I think I'm sure that they will be keen to share their experience of how they went about it. So Lorna, we'll be in touch with you about that. And as you've registered with an email address, we can contact you that way. Now, I'm conscious of the fact that our two speakers, and one of them's obviously got knocked off by the dreadful internet, our two speakers have both got speaking engagements at 1:30. So I was told that I must strictly adhere to time and to finish promptly so that they could get on to their next point. There's just one other question here about having been on Tibolone from a young age of age 30 when the woman needed to have a hysterectomy. And I was going to ask Kathy for her thoughts about that because this lady's still experiencing symptoms. I mean, my personal experience or take on that would be that there are lots of other HRT preparations for a woman who doesn't have a uterus. It could be pure HRT in patch form or transdermal with very minimal side effects that are probably much more effective than Tibolone. It was great when we didn't have all that transdermal thing, but Tibolone is possibly a little bit past history now. Kathy, would you agree with that?
I certainly think for somebody who's had a hysterectomy, presuming that she may have been put on Tibolone because the hysterectomy was perhaps for endometriosis, for example. So there was some sense at the time, but now all these years later, she can probably switch to a bioidentical, body identical type of HRT, which may be more effective.
Lovely, thank you. So what rich contributions our speakers have made. So I want to thank everybody very, very much again. Can I just sum up now by saying we've launched this webinar today as part of our Menopause Workplace Pledge campaign. The Wellbeing and Women team and myself as chair are really excited that we've had more than 100 companies sign up in just a week and some very prominent companies too. So in terms of many of the questions in the chat, well, how do I get my organization to buy in? I think you need to show them, look how many people or look how many companies have bought in and they're buying into this and they're recognizing the pledge because they really want to be part of something that's positive and helps them to maintain and retain their workforce. So signing up to the pledge, what employers have got to commit to is recognizing that the menopause can be an issue for the female employers in their workplace, or possibly the male employers who've got wives or sisters or family at home who've got menopausal symptoms. Number two, talking openly, positively and respectfully about the menopause. That doesn't cost anything. That just takes a degree of kindness and wanting to be generous to one's fellow human beings. And then thirdly, supporting and informing our employees affected by the menopause. So I'm thrilled that you've joined us today. I'm thrilled that the Countess of Wessex is our patron and that she launched the Menopause Pledge campaign with me on a Zoom platform last week, and as many of you will have seen in the popular press, has become very vocal about how fabulous we are in our 40s, 50s, and she wants us to be even more fabulous in our 60s and 70s. So anyone can join this. You don't just have to be an employer. You can be an individual, a man or a woman, and you can join the pledge as well. Just go onto our website. We're aiming to have a top down from employers downwards down through the organization and a bottom up approach as well for employers to take the information along to their seniors or their employers and say, look at this. And may I also put a shout out for Hello Magazine, who joined with us and partnered with us in launching our campaign last week, and Bupa, who have been sponsoring us, and also a very grateful thank you to Bolt, Burke and Kemp, who have sponsored this webinar and several others of our women's health webinars in the recent past. So with that, I'm going to thank our two speakers again. Maria, I'm thrilled that you've come back to us. I'm sorry about your internet glitch. Thank you for your contribution and for being so generous in answering the questions. And Kathy, thank you for your expertise. Another shout out, remember Kathy's book, it's a really good read, Menopause. So I'm a great believer in if you become a mini expert in the problem that's affecting you, you just get back into the driving seat and you're back in control of your life again. So with that, my thanks to everybody who's contributed to this and to the Wellbeing of Women team for arranging the platform today, and for all of those individuals and all of those companies who have already sponsored us and joined us on our journey, and to all those companies out there who haven't yet joined us and I hope will be signing up in the very near future. So thank you, everybody. And I look forward to meeting you again on another Wellbeing of Women health platform. Bye-bye.
Thank you.